Both.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're live.
I think we are too.
Okay,
So everybody needs to mute at this point.
me too. Hello, it is January 19th. Welcome. Happy New Year. Good to see everybody again. I want you to know that we are so excited because this is the first time we've actually had an Indy Grand Slam. I'd like to welcome everyone. If you placed first, second, or third during the 2021 Indy Story Slam, during that season, you are eligible to compete tonight. And we've got a long list. I'm not going to dilly-dally because I want to make sure everyone has plenty of time. I want to remind you that we are co-sponsored by Freetown Village and Storytelling Arts of Indiana. This event is sponsored by the Gelzer Investments, and our media sponsor is WFYI. Now, you know this is free. We will not be passing the plate, but just in case you want to make an online donation, you can text SAI, which stands for Storytelling Arts of Indiana, to 44321, and the donations will be split between Freetown Village and Storytelling Arts of Indiana. I'd like to welcome you again, and I know we have quite a few participants, and the very first participant I have a previous winter is Carol Purcell. And I want to know, because I guess I should look at the gallery view to see who is all there. But Carol, are you there? Hello. Well, we're going to come back to her.
I had to unmute there. How about
There
that?
you are. Okay.
Okay.
Hi, Carol. How you
Hi
doing?
there.
You
I am
looking all
fine.
spiffy. I love those dragonflies. I'm just giving you a moment to relax. This is what we call the transition. Okay. But we are ready to welcome you back and ready to hear your story. The floor is yours.
All righty. Blizzards are memorable. We like the 3-day kind back where I grew up, the kind where Dad stayed home. And after the snow stopped, we would go over the 3-foot drifts and cross-country skis, and we would tamp down the best toboggan runs. When our mittens were cold, then we would go inside and play board games, make homemade cookies, eat and have hot chocolate and read a good book. When we got a little older, because it's snow country, or at least winter near Canada, we also like to do downhill skiing. The thing about downhill skiing is you need a base so you can cut and do curves and all the rest. Now, snow is unpredictable, which we all agree, but there are some conditions that make it happen. There's freezing cold and a wind that sweeps over open moisture like the lakes. And that creates the proper conditions for snow. Now, where we lived, it didn't always snow that well, so we sometimes just prayed for snow. And then there was one more good way to get to it, which is go to the mountains. But that's 7 hours away during the school year. Now, my junior year, we had a new band director. She was a skier and she had a plan. We would go to Saranac Lake for the winter carnival. It would be school sanctioned because she had 2 plans. We would march and we would compete. And also we would go to a museum on the way back home. That sounded cool to us. So into the bus went our instruments, our required outfits, our skis, and to make things affordable, because we are country kids, we all had sleeping bags and we slept in the chaperone curtained bottom of the United Methodist Church. That Saturday, we went and marched. It was a great day because we won. 108 kids, totally thrilled. We never got that first in state fair. So why not? We were just really cool. Now, You might have thought that we were marching in snow globe, floating flakes of snow, and all was really cool. But you know what? In 1971, that's a while ago, it rained. It rained so well that it erased the snow on Whiteface Mountain, which was 18 miles away. It cleaned up the streets and there was no residual ice. Back at the Methodist Church, we hung up our wool wet uniforms. Mrs. Arquette met and she said, I've made a call. We are going to go to the Lake Placid Club for dinner and a movie. Lake Placid Club was awesome. I'm saying awe is the big word because this was the playland of the escapees from New York City. Connected buildings kept the winter out, and we walked past long draped windows, gilded furniture, and went to a little theater that was for a summer orchestra. Mrs. Arquette, you gave us a great memory. Next day, we're off heading home to the museum. Syracuse is 71 miles away from our hometown, but a little bit farther west. We stopped for lunch, and the bus drivers called home, and they were checking in, telling their wives when they're coming in, and the wives said, no museum, please. The conditions are right. The wind is blowing. It's super cold. We're brewing a really first-class blizzard. No museum. Got in the cars, actually the buses, and off we went. It was dark when we got home, that 71 miles. 20 inches had accumulated. My sister and I didn't get home that night. The top of the hill that has a drift, and that's a famous drift. It's called the road erasing, car swallowing, top of the hill snowdrift. My parents got stuck. So we had to stay at my dad's cousin's house. We stayed until the plow finally found the road underneath that drift. So we got the snow, but it wasn't the mountain. Oh, well, we did get snow. So when we tell about those blizzards back in New York, the most interesting one was when it rained in the Adirondacks and blizzarded back home. Thank you.
That's great. That was an appropriate story for this time of the year. Thank
I
you
wanted
so
the
much.
snow to happen here, but gotta get the right conditions.
Well, I'm willing to wait. Uh-oh. I pressed the button and something happened. Well, that was truly wonderful. Thank you so much. I keep trying to adjust my iPad because it will not cooperate. It will not give me the full, glorious, glamorous photo that I thought I had. So pardon me, please. How many of you remember all the topics we had throughout the course of the year? And our participants tonight had the option of either telling the same story, telling us a new one. It was your call. But right now, the next teller up is Leslie O. Leslie.
Leslie's not here.
Okay. Is she? I just heard a ding. All right, how about the next person in line on my list is, we don't have an order. I saw somebody ask that question. Is Stephanie Edwards. You need to unmute and talk to us. Okay.
Did it work? Am I unmuted? I'm unmuted. Okay. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
I want to talk to you about love. Valentine's Day is coming up. And at one point in my life, I would have said, oh, hearts and flowers and eros love. My heart beats so hard. My loins are ready for love. Somebody give me flowers, lots of chocolate. But I'm going to tell you, February 14th, 1975, I got a whole different outlook on love, mainly because that was the time that I had let someone in my home, and that person ended up cutting my throat and stabbing me. I had two little people. My children were little then. Uh, I ended up running out the door, trying to get away from this person. And he tackled me on my front porch. And I remember dropping my kids. And this, of course, February, funny weather. It had snowed and there was ice on the porch. I remember seeing my youngest child spinning just spinning down the porch, and my oldest one had flown out on her face. But love made me react to the place where I wanted to push this guy off my back so that I could fight, because I didn't want anything to happen to my kids. Well, he jumped up and ran. So I gathered up my kids and I walked a couple of doors down to my neighbor's house. Here's how love works when it's not your family. She loved me enough to take care of my kids, clean them up, give them fresh clothes and everything while I went to the hospital. After I got into the hospital, some more love came from my sister. She made sure that she had called my pediatrician to find out, what do we do with these kids? You know, a lot of times people make terrible mistakes and they just won't talk to kids about things that have happened. They were little, but he said, let them talk. And anytime my oldest one wanted to talk about it, we did. We went through a long transitional period where she had to get over big, tall men standing over us. But that love inside of me would not let me think about if I wasn't here, who would raise my kids? Well, my husband was just not the one as far as I was concerned. Even though we were together, it would have fallen on his mom. And I didn't want my mother-in-law to raise my kids for me. So I was just too stubborn in love with these kids to not survive. And after that, I found out that I had friends that had love for me because they cared about what happened to me and my kids. So my sister even borrowed baby furniture from her friends so that I could come to her house and spend a few days there unwinding, because I was kind of paranoid to be in my own house at that point. But really, it was probably because I hadn't cleaned it up to begin with, and I'd have to go back and do housework. Well, any reason, getting your throat cut is not a great reason to not go home. But I mean, it worked for me at that point. I didn't have to go clean up anything. But love comes in so many different ways. We get hung up on Valentine's Day, especially about erotic love. But I'm telling you, I've never looked at Valentine's Day the same way again. I don't dislike it, but I think of it from a different perspective. And I think that's might be something that we all ought to think about, especially now, because so many awful things have happened and we have to keep kindness and love in our perspective. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. That was scary, but that was wonderful. Thank you for sharing. All right. I'm looking at the messages coming through, but I don't have time to talk to y'all now because I got this long list of storytellers, but I hope to tell you more about the people who are chiming in. But our next teller is Michael Hobbs. Hi, Michael. How you doing? Happy New Year.
I hope you've been well. Oh, well, it's things have been going well here. And I just want to tell you a story that's come up. It's generated on its own. And what I've been, as some of you know, over the last year, one of the things that I've been working on is I've been trying to determine my dad's legacy, because my dad passed a little over a year ago, and he's the one that taught me storytelling. But not only that, he taught me other stuff too. He taught me how to tell jokes. He taught me how to sing country music at the top of my voice. That's what was my dad. And it got me to start to be thinking about my own legacy. And also, you know, inheriting a few things made me start thinking about things such as, well, my will and stuff of that nature. And I was going down through things, The house, well, yeah, the hub gets that. That's a given. The car, the hub gets that. But then there were other things. Things like family photos. Who gets those? Well, my sister. We'll go that way. What about the 500 cookbooks I have? My husband started mentioning the Goodwill, and I'm like, the Cooking Guild. And then there was the other thing that came up. You see, I have one of the world's largest collections of Scooby-Doo memorabilia. I love Scooby-Doo. I saw Scooby-Doo the day it premiered in 1969. I was 6 years old, 9 a.m. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? You know what I'm saying? Oh, I love Scooby-Doo. And I've got pictures and stuffed animals and videos and signed photos and animation cells, everything. And that had me wondering what to do with it. Well, the other night, I had to go to dinner with my godson, Jamie, my youngest godson. And Jamie's a wonderful young man. He's very bright. He's in his first year of college, but he's kind of shy and quiet. And he and I get along like two peas in a pod. I love him dearly, and he loves me. Well, we're at dinner, and we're talking about stuff. And he says to me, he says, Uncle Mike, my dad was doing his will, and it got me to thinking. I'm like, well, that's a bit of synchronicity, isn't it? I'm like, well, about what, Jamie? He's like, well, when you pass, if Uncle Jim doesn't want it, can I have your Scooby-Doo collection? I'm like, what? He's like, can I have your Scooby-Doo collection? Really? He's like, yeah, I love Scooby-Doo. Ruby Dooby Doo. Oh, and I spent many a Saturday morning babysitting and showing him all this Scooby-Doo stuff. So I knew it would find a great home. And that was the first gift he gave me that night. Well, but the second gift he gave me is when we were driving home. And it was about a 15-minute drive from where we'd eaten back to his dad's house. And we're driving along, and suddenly he turns on the radio. I'm like, okay. And it goes way up high. It's like, Uncle Mike, do you know this song? I'm like, well, yeah. And suddenly the windows go down, and he goes, and Jamie goes, blame it all on my roots. I showed up in boots. And I'm like, and ruined your black tie affair? He's like, yes, Uncle Mike, yes. I'm like, my dad's legacy lives on. And Jamie and I were going, because I got friends in low places where the whiskey flows and the beer chases my blues away. I'll be okay. And I could hear my dad singing in the background. I could hear him singing at full blast while Jamie and I are driving through the night with the windows down and the radio on full. And not only am I passing on my legacy to Jamie, but I've passed on my dad's. And that's my story.
Wonderful. And that's how it works, Mike. That's how it works. Thank you so much for sharing that story. What a legacy. Listen, don't quit your day job, but I'm thinking you might need to ride down the road to Nashville. You could cut a record. Yeah, I'd buy it. Well, our next teller, and I can't tell, why can't I tell who's here or not? Anyway, Lisa Sears, are you with us? Because your name.
I am. I got to get everything.
Hi.
I don't know what's going on here. Hey, how you doing?
Okay. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. I couldn't get this thing working right, so I got switched over to a different device. So I was going to tell a story about my breast cancer, but since my buddy Louis Anderson is in the hospital with cancer, I'm going to tell the story of how he became my buddy. So back in January of 2017, I was still new to doing comedy, and I went up to Lafayette because the Mad Hatter Productions, a local comedy production company, had Louis Anderson at the Lafayette Theater. And I was like, might as well go see the legend up in Indiana, right? And I had worked with these guys. So I asked him, hey, will I get to meet him after the show? And they said, yeah, he's going to do a little meet and greet with some comedians after the show. And I was like, cool. So I drove up to Lafayette. Honestly, I'd never seen Louis Anderson stand up in my life. I knew him from Coming to America because I don't watch much TV or anything like that. And I honestly don't watch much stand up, even now. But so I went up there and we got to meet him afterwards. And I stood back and at the end and I said, I'm Lisa Sears. I'm just a new comedian from Indianapolis. And he goes, send me your set and I'll take a look at it. And I'm like, whatever. Louis Anderson's going to watch my set. Okay. And he goes, I gave you the email, didn't I? I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, send it. So one of the guys from the production company took him back to his hotel and I stood to talk to the other guy and helped him clean up from the event. About 45 minutes later, he came back and I got my car to leave. And I was like, you know what? I better send it now. So I sent him an email and I sent him the set, my 6th time ever on stage when I opened for Pat McAfee, because I'm like, I'll look all big and bad. I opened for Pat McAfee. He doesn't know who Pat McAfee is. No concept who Pat McAfee, maybe now, but back then he didn't really know who he was. Doesn't watch a lot of football, unless it's Minnesota or whatever. And anyway, so I sent him my set when I opened for Pat McAfee. I got in the car, didn't think twice because I was like, there's no way, you know, whatever. He was being nice. And I actually got an email back when I hit 465 and I was like almost wrecked. And I was like, what? And he goes, send me your phone number and I'll call you tomorrow. It's late. And now I'm like, okay, now you're just being sweet again, you know? The next day I had seen on Instagram, because I added him on Instagram that night, that he was on Baskets. And I was like, I better start watching this if this guy's maybe going to call me. So I was watching Baskets and my phone rings and it's Beverly Hills, California. And I'm like, what? Oh my God. Hello. And he's like, Lisa. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, it's Louie. And I'm like, yeah, I can tell by the voice. And he's like, are you busy? And I was like, no. And he goes, get a piece of paper and a pen. I got some homework for you. And he's like, I watched your set and I think you're very talented. And I'm just like, and he goes, if you ever question this, remember this conversation. I'm like, okay. He said, when's your next set? And I said, Wednesday. I'm in the finals of a comedy competition at Morty's, my old home club before they were taken over, whatever, bought out, whatever, by Panera. Anyways, not hard feelings there. So he said, well, call me on Tuesday and I'll go over your set with you. So I called him on Tuesday and he helped me work my set. And then I called him. He wanted me to let him know. And then I got to meet him. He was in Illinois the next week. And I said, hey, if I come up to see you, will I get to see you? And he said, yeah. So I got to see him then. And every time I had a bit or something, I would text it to him and he would give me some feedback on it and everything. And we've been friends. I mean, and he tells me he loves me and he's a very sweet guy. First thing he always says out of his mouth every time he sees me is, how is your health? First words out of his mouth every time I see him, because he knows I've gone through cancer myself and I have MS, and that's what he's always focused on. I went up to Michigan to see him, took a friend of mine, and we went backstage and hung out with him and everything. And then he called us out in the middle of his set up in Michigan, just like how to stand up and everything, and just like mind blowing. And this man is one of the best humans I've ever met. He texted me the next day and said, hey, will you send me the pictures you took of me in the green room? And I said, yeah. And so I sent them to him. And I said, you know, if you have a small part for a funny homo on Baskets, I'd be down. He said, send me your headshot and resume. And 2 months later, I got an audition email to audition for a part of Livid Protester. And so I actually got the part on Baskets and got to work with him one day. And he has been, I hadn't planned on this story. Like I said, I planned something else, but since he's in the hospital fighting cancer, I thought I would do something about him, because he is not only a legend in comedy, he is a legendary human. He is one of the nicest humans, would do anything for anybody. And the one thing I'm going to ask is you guys just keep him in your thought and prayers. If you have juju, if you pray, whatever you do, just pray for my buddy, please, because he's an amazing human.
And that was an amazing story from another amazing human. Thank you so much. That was great. And that's what we need. More legendary people, more legendary people. And you could be legendary too, because you could come on and visit us at the next Story Slam, which is going to be at the Centerpoint Brewery, 1125 East Brookside Avenue, on February 16th. And the theme then is Encounters. So if you live in Central Indiana, come along, join us. I'll buy you a beer. Say you heard me say, I will buy you a beer. And when I see you there at Centerpoint. Well, Susie, I'm going to mess up your last name. Is it Cowan? Kewen. Susie, are you
It
with
is
us? Cowan?
Yes,
Okay.
it is Cowan.
All right. I've slept since then, girl. Okay. But welcome, Happy New Year, and we're ready to listen to your story.
Well, I'm just a small town girl. I grew up in Beaver, Oklahoma, population 2,300. Now, who in their right mind would name a town Beaver? I spent much of my time as a young girl dreaming of going to faraway places, far away from the cattle and the oil rigs, far away from the dust storms and the tumbleweeds. And when I was in my 40s, I got the chance to travel. I had an invitation to the Billy Graham Crusade International Training Conference. So I really persuaded my husband to suck it up, and you can take care of our children for 10 days while I fly away to Amsterdam. Amsterdam, the land of tulips and windmills and canals. So I found myself in the airport awaiting my first flight, and across the speakers came the announcement that my connecting flight in Michigan, the airport had been hit by a tornado and all flights would need to be rescheduled. 20 hours later, I arrive in Amsterdam without my luggage, not to be found. So I took a shuttle to the conference center. And when I got there, I looked for a phone to call my husband and tell him I was okay, see how he was doing. You know how when things are going wrong, you can just hold it together and be really strong until you call home and then you just break down and cry. That was me. Now, my husband, who's rather matter of fact, said, well, dear, do you have your passport? And I said, yes, I do. Do you have your money? Yes, I do. Oh, then you're going to be fine. Everything will work out. No big deal. So much for sympathy. So I found a table with a big welcome sign over it. And I approached them and I described my predicament. And they were very kind. And they said, oh, we'll check with the airport. And as soon as your luggage comes in, we'll have it sent right over to your room. And then I paused and they could see the puzzled look on my face. And they said, oh, if you're worried about having clothes for the next few days, we have a booth set up right over there. You can just get in line. It's to give clothes and items to people and the pastors that are coming from third world countries. Oh, so I start walking that direction and my mind is going, but I'm from Carmel, Indiana. I have more in that one piece of luggage that I lost than these people are going to have in a lifetime. But I made my way over and I stood in line rather sheepishly. And I began to feel like the middle of an Oreo cookie. My white face was just shining in the middle of a sea of dark faces. And I felt so embarrassed to be using the resources they needed. But when I reached the front of the line, the staff said, oh, you need it. Please help yourself. Well, 3 very long days later, my luggage just shows up. I took the clothes that I'd been given, folded them neatly and put them in a briefcase that I had brought with me to give away to someone who might need it. At lunch that day, I struck up a conversation with a lovely man from Togo. Didn't know where Togo was. And he noticed the clothes in the briefcase and he points to them in his broken English and he says, what that? And I said, oh, clothes that I don't need anymore. And he looked and his eyes got wide and he looked at me and he looked at the clothes and he said, you like my wife. And I said, oh, would you like the clothes that I brought for your wife? And his eyes got wide and he grinned a toothless grin. And he said, oh, yes, please, ma'am, please. Oh, thank you, thank you. So it was in that week that I was able to worship with 20,000 followers, speaking in 24 languages. And this little girl's dream of seeing the world had come true in Amsterdam. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Susie. I know when you start naming 3 things in Amsterdam, I was waiting. You know what I was waiting on, right? That was a good story. Thank you for sharing. Listen, our next teller is Frances Whitener. Frances, I saw you a minute ago, but you're not on my screen now, but I know you're out there.
Yes, I'm right here. Can you hear me? Well,
Yes.
all
Yes.
right. All right. This is my story. If any of you have ever watched the Andy Griffith Show on TV, and I imagine that includes most of you, you may remember that Andy and Barney Fife would sometimes say to each other, we received a package from Mount Pilot today, or we have a prisoner from Mount Pilot who's going to stay with us overnight, and then we're going to send him on elsewhere tomorrow morning. Well, there is no Mount Pilot, but there is a Pilot Mountain. I know that because my father grew up in Pilot Mountain, and that North Carolina, and that's where my grandparents lived for their entire lives. Pilot Mountain is named that way because there is a 1,200-foot mountain that rises, and there is a knob on the top that is called the Pilot Knob, or it looks sort of like a something you have on a pilot light. Pilot Mountain didn't have very much in the way of stores. People would often go over to Winston, as Grandmama Fowler always called it. That was before it was named Winston-Salem, and to go shopping. There was an axe handle factory, and there was a drugstore, and there were a few other small stores. Pilot Mountain was about 15 minutes away from Mount Airy, which is where Andy Griffith grew up. But it was not something that, not a place where people went unless they were going there to go shopping or something like that. There was a man named Blumjai Needham who opened a little bitty shop, a little bitty snack shop in Pilot Mountain. Now, when I say little bitty, I mean little bitty. In fact, he could not get more than 6 customers in this little store at the same time. He sold soft drinks and potato chips and nabs and things like that. Nothing that was very much, didn't fix sandwiches or meals or anything very big. He received a new shipment in one day, one that he'd been waiting for. It was apple turnovers, and they came in little plastic bags. That day, a man named Benny Reams walked into his little store, and Blumjai said to him, Benny, I have a new shipment that's just come in today, and I want you to be the first person to try it. What is it? Asked Benny. It's apple turnovers. Apple turnovers. Now, here, you take an apple turnover and eat this, and I want you to tell me what you think of it when you finish. I have a little bit of work I need to turn around and do, and so just talk to me when you finished it. All right, said Benny. Blumjai turned around and began to work on some things on another counter there in the back. And so Benny opened the container, the little bag that it was in. Now, Benny was a nice person and was had many friends. People liked him a lot, but Benny didn't have the sharpest knife in the drawer. So after he opened the apple turnover, he pushed the apple turnover out, and underneath it, there was a piece of cardboard that was there to keep the apple turnover from falling apart when it was being shipped. Benny didn't see that there was cardboard underneath, so he pushed the apple turnover and the cardboard out at the same time and took a bite into them and chewed on it and swallowed it. Whew. He thought to himself, that's kind of a tough apple turnover, but I'll try another bite and see what that tastes like. So he pushed the apple turnover and the cardboard out, took a second bite. Chewed, it was every bit as hard as the first bite. Swallowed it. There was one more bite he could take. And so he gave that one a try. And he was eating and chewing as hard as he could because it was the apple turnover and the cardboard underneath. And he swallowed that. And by then, Blumchild was finished what he was doing. And so he turned around and said, Benny, I want to know your opinion. What do you think of the apple turnover? And Benny said, well, Blumchild, it tastes pretty good, but it's got the toughest damn crust I ever ate.
That was great. Thank you, Francis. That was wonderful. Well, now, rumor has it that we have been joined by Leslie. Oh, Leslie, are you there? Are you ready? I can't tell. Leslie, don't make me sing no more.
Leslie,
Okay, we're gonna move.
no, wait, she's here. She just
Okay.
needs to unmute.
Okay. Well, now, are you there? Are you ready? Shall I
Leslie,
send the paramedics? They won't come. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I'll come back to you, Leslie. I'm going down my list. The next chanteuse / storyteller we have on the list is Beverly Williams. Beverly, are you ready to tell?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Hey.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. This story is, my story is Miss Maisie Ain't No Fool. I met Miss Maisie at the mortuary where my mother worked and also where I was a young musician at the time. Miss Maisie was a friend to the mortuary and she had a few casualties. When we first met Miss Maisie, her husband of 45 years had died. She was the sweetest lady I ever met. She was kind, and she was also a school teacher. And so we loved Miss Maisie, and Miss Maisie would always often come back to the mortuary just to give us like little treats and stuff because she said we treated her so well when her husband died. Well, Miss Maisie had a daughter, and her daughter, this was like 10 years after her husband, her daughter passed away. And so once again, we met Miss Maisie, but the daughter had a son, which was Miss Maisie's grandson. And so Miss Maisie had the responsibility of raising her grandson because the daughter was gone and her husband was gone. And she did not want her son-in-law to have the responsibility of raising her grandchild. So Miss Maisie raised this young man. And mind you, Miss Maisie was already an elderly lady, but she did an awesome job at raising this young man. So she raised this young man, and then Miss Maisie really got up in her years, and it was time for her to retire. And the one thing she asked for her grandson, she said, please do not put me in a nursing home. And he said that he wouldn't. But I guess as time went on, he grew tired of Miss Maisie. And so he found a way for her to sign the papers so that she could sign away her house and so that she would be put in the nursing home. Well, Miss Maisie finally was put in the nursing home. She wasn't a fan of the nursing home. She wasn't happy, but she met a Jamaican nurse. And the nurse told Miss Maisie, you know, Rory, I take good care of you. You know, Rory, you know, worry. I got you, Miss Maisie. So Miss Maisie and the nurse became very good friends. Nobody knew Miss Maisie had a brother. Her brother was a stock market genius. But here, once again, somebody from the Macy family was in the mortuary, and it was her brother. Nobody knew how rich this man was, but he left his sister, Miss Maisie, everything he had, $3 million. The grandson that put Miss Maisie in the nursing home and stole her money and stole her house did not know that the uncle had died. So Miss Maisie and the nurse, they called a lawyer, and they concocted this thing where the grandson couldn't get any more of her money. So Miss Maisie was $3 million rich. Well, Miss Maisie lived in the community and everybody loved her. When she got that $3 million, her favorite snack was peanuts and Coca-Cola. She bought everybody in the nursing home with peanuts that you boil that was in the bag and Coca-Cola in a bottle of Coca-Cola. It was her favorite snack. And so everybody loved Miss Maisie. And her and her nurse, they had a great bond. The nurse would stay over. She would comb Miss Maisie's hair. She had beautiful, gray, long hair. She would sit with Miss Maisie. They would watch TV together. And her favorite show was The Price is Right. So she knew that Miss Maisie would be in the room watching The Price is Right. She made sure that Miss Maisie got her food, and she made sure that everything was done for Miss Maisie. Well, the nurse came in early one day, and she went right to Miss Maisie, as she always did, because she loved Miss Maisie. But the grandson, who never visited her and never cared about her, always kind of showed up when he thought Miss Maisie was going to get what they call an allowance. And he would take her allowance. So the nurse went into the room, and unbeknownst to her, she didn't know. She thought Miss Maisie was asleep, but Miss Maisie had slept away. The nurse was heartbroken. She didn't know what to do. She told the staff, not my Miss Maisie, not my Miss Maisie. She can't go. And the staff said, but you have to let her go. So she remembered that Miss Maisie told her to call our mortuary. So they called the mortuary, and they said, Miss Maisie has died. And everybody at the mortuary was tore up too. We were heartbroken. Not Miss Maisie. No, we thought she was going to live forever. But that wasn't the case. So the funeral director said, Miss Maisie left a note for you, ma'am, the nurse, and also left a note for her grandson. Well, the grandson got there and he thought it was money. No, it was a note. And the note said, I know you stole my house and my money. And here's $2 for your time. But when the nurse opened up her letter, it was $2 million. And she told the nurse, thank you for everything that you've ever done for me. And I know that the funeral home will take great care of you. The nurse said, what do I do? The mortician said, sign the back and take it to your bank. That's my story.
That was a story for my soul. Thank you so much. That was a great story. Sign it, and take it to the bank. Somebody needs to tell me that. Thank you. Hallelujah. That was a good story. I appreciate it. Well, now I'm going to reiterate that the rules for this Grand Slam are the same as any slam we've ever had. It has to be your story in your own words, 5 minutes or less. And we have a wonderful judge. Well, our judges, I don't know who they are. They're sitting out there. They're listening to the tales. And we have a timekeeper. The timekeeper is keeping time. But don't pay attention. Tell us your story because we are anxious to hear it. And with that, I see Leslie sitting there with a smile on her face, and I believe she's ready to tell her story.
I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try. I'm going to tell a story of the age where I was in my early 40s and lived in Providence, Rhode Island. And my husband had absolutely no idea what he was doing when he gave me a gift certificate for a complete makeover at Squire's Salon. Oh, I had been curious about Squires for years and years and years because the ladies who came out of there always looked like movie stars. It seemed like it was a place that was just full of magic. And here I was sitting in a chair at Squires with this young, handsome man doting over me and asking me, how would you like me to make you look? As if he could do all the magic in the world. And I said, I have no idea. I guess it's your call. He left the room and he came back carrying a tray that had some plastic bags of kind of granules in it, something powdery, and a few bottles that looked like they had something colored in them, probably hair dye, and a mortar and a pestle. And he set it up on the table in front of me and proceeded to turn himself into Merlin the magician. And with great pizzazz, he mixed it all together with a mortar and a pestle. And when he was finished, he dipped his finger in it and he said, perfect. And he wrote the formula of my personally invented hair dye down on a card and put it in his hair dye recipe file. Well, when I left Squires that day, I felt like $1 trillion. Oh man, I couldn't believe what I looked like. People on the street stopped me and they said, you look marvelous. What have you done to yourself? And those were the people that didn't even know me. My friends just went gaga over the transformation. I spent several weeks pretending like I was a movie star. It was so much fun. I never thought that I would feel like I was even close to being a movie star. And after a while, it began to wear off. And a few weeks later, my old gray started growing in the roots. And it seemed to me that the faster my old hair grew in, the shorter my dyed hair became. I became so embarrassed, I just couldn't go back to Squires and ask them to fix it. But finally, I became so desperate that I did. Well, my young man who paid me such lavish attention didn't even remember who I was. He didn't remember my name. Furthermore, once he figured it out, he was quite PO'd with me. Oh, lady, you let yourself go. Oh, man, you're in such bad shape. I don't know if I'm going to be able to fix you this time. And then when he dug in his recipe box for my special dye that he concocted for me, he couldn't find it. And as he's scratching, he said, oh, I remember, I probably thought you were never, ever going to come back again, and I just threw it away. We're going to have to start over again from scratch. So I left the room, and he came back with another assortment of powders and liquids and dyes, and he didn't bother with the pizzazz of being Merlin. He just very hastily and sloppily mixed up this dye. He wasn't going to put any magic into it for me, not after my coming in and looking like such a wreck. And when he finally got it done and he dipped his finger in and he put it on my hair, he said, no, this isn't quite right, but it'll do. And he slopped the dye on my hair. And when he had me coated, he covered my face and my head with a plastic bag. And when I was ready to leave Squires, I looked in the mirror and I realized that my hair was coal black. And that he had shaved all of the hair on the back of my head, as short as a man's, and had left the sides longer than my earlobes, and then put some goop on them so they were stiff, and they went poof, like ocean waves, sticking out toward my face as if they were going to attack anybody who approached me. And all I wanted to do was cry. And I settled my bill and I got in the car and I drove home. Oh, I was so wretchedly unhappy. I wouldn't even park in the back lot. I parked right smack in front of the house and raced up the stairs and opened the door and threw myself on the foyer floor and bawled like a baby. And my husband came down the stairs and said, "Oh, what's the matter? Are you okay?" And I told him what had happened. And I said, I want you to promise me that you will never let anybody see me looking like this. I said, if I ever go to the Salvation Army again, I'm going to have to wear a stocking cap. He said, finally, once he got himself calmed down and was sure that I was okay, he said, why don't you call Squires and tell them? He said, I'm sure they'll fix it for you free of charge. All you have to do is call and tell them I don't want an unhappy customer. And I said, no, I'm too angry. I'm too angry to talk to Squires. I don't ever want to talk to them again. And he left me sitting there and he went to call Squires. And while I was talking to Squires, the light turned on in my head and I thought, I have a solution. And I reached in the drawer of the desk right next to me and I pulled out the dog hair clippers and I
Okay, Leslie, we did not hear what happened after you pulled out the dog hair.
I went into the bathroom and I shaved every stitch of black hair off of my head. And my husband called me to the phone and he said, Squires wants to make an appointment with you. They're willing to do your hair over for free twice and get you all fixed up. And I looked at him and I said, I don't need to talk to anybody at Squires anymore. I have solved the problem. And he said, okay. I said, I never need to go to Squires Salon, not ever again. And then I ripped off.
I don't know what to do in this situation because your sound has cut off. Leslie?
It says it's unmuted.
Yeah, now I can hear you. It's something, I don't know if you moved or what, but you ripped off what? Start from there. You ripped off. Don't leave us hanging here, Leslie. You ripped off. Did you tie a scarf on? We didn't hear that part of your story. Leslie, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
I ripped off my hat and showed him my bald head. I solved the problem.
Leslie. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. And your husband's mouth was as wide open as mine. Thank you. We need to come back and revisit that issue of your sound. We'll see what happens. Right now, though, I have on my list Noel Bewley. Noel, are you with us?
I am with you.
Hey,
And
Noel, Happy New Year.
thank you. And I'm ready to go. My story is about a cat and traveling with a cat. If you keep hearing dings, my mother's birthday, 96th birthday would be today, and all of a sudden, all of her grandkids are sending pictures back and forth, and I don't know how to take it off of my computer. So here I go with my story. My son lived in Salt Lake City for 4 years. My grandson was born in Salt Lake City. They decided to move back to Indiana. They told me my only job was to fly out to Salt Lake City, pick up their cat, and bring Theodore back to Indianapolis, because they couldn't drive him, take 2 weeks to drive him coming back. So I took on that job. Fly out to Salt Lake City on Monday morning, fly back with the cat on Tuesday morning. The cat and I didn't have a good relationship. I have never put my hand on the cat that he didn't claw me. And since I'm on blood thinners, that always became a mess. So I was kind of leery about doing this, but I said I would do it anyway. So I took my cat carrier that I bought, flew to Salt Lake City. The vet had given the cat medication. So Tuesday morning, we got up and gave the cat anti-anxiety medication, nausea medication, and a little sedative 1 hour before I took him to the airport. And it worked like a charm. I picked Theodore up and put him in that cat carrier. He didn't bother me at all. Zipped it up, walked through the airport with him, got to security. That was the first glitch. Tried to go through security, and they said, "I'm sorry, you can't. I have 2 hip replacements." So they said, "You have to take the cat out, give him to somebody from security, then you go through security." So I was afraid that wasn't going to work. But anyway, I took him out and handed him to the security woman, told her to hug him and pet him gently. It worked like a charm. The cat just laid in her arms. She laid him back in that carrier, and he didn't move. This long-haired yellow cat was just beautiful and relaxed, and I picked him up and walked to my plane. The plane was half empty, so I walked to the back with him and got in a seat by myself. The only problem was when the plane started its engine, I could hear him scratching at the side of the carrier. And then we started to roll, and how you rumble across the tarmac, and he was scratching more, and I noticed a hole getting into the side of the carrier. And we pulled out on the runway and stopped. And the pilot said, "I'm sorry, we're going to sit here for 45 minutes because the Denver airport has a runway down and we can't get there." So as he said that, a big hole comes out of the top of the carrier. One paw comes up. I take my hand and push it back down. And when I push the paw down, he hooks a claw into my little finger and rips a slit across the end of my little finger. And so it just starts dripping down my arm. And I closed the carrier, and I had a book I was going to read, and I stuffed it down on top of him to keep his head in. And I kept him in my seat then because we weren't taking off. The stewardess walked by and said, "You have to put him under the seat." And I showed her that he had torn out the whole top of the carrier. And I said, "Do you have any suggestions about how to do that?" And she said, "No, but I'll think about it. But you have to put him under the seat." And so I'm smashing him down with the book. I showed her my hand. She kind of went, "Oh," and said, "I'll be right back." So she brought me first aid stuff. I smashed the book down, We started to take off. I stuck him under there and I held him the entire flight to Denver, pushing him down. I take that back. I did not hold him down there. I picked the crate up and I put it beside me and I let his head stick out and I just petted him. He did not want out of the crate. He just didn't want to have his head in there. He was perfectly fine, sort of. And just before we started to come down, I pushed him back in. I folded the thing double. I could still see more holes where he had scratched it. And she walked by and said, you know, you're going to need a new crate or carrier. And I said, yeah, but where do I get that? And she said, well, we'll get one at the gate. The problem was we had sat 45 minutes. I only had an hour between flights. So I was thinking, I'm missing this flight. We landed. I folded the crate up as much as I could. So he was just smashed in there and couldn't move. I carried my carrier. I got out of the plane and the guardian angel came by, who was the stewardess. And she said, let me show you where to get a carrier. And it was right where I was standing. The people turned around, picked up a carrier, put it on the top. That'll be $50. I handed her my credit card. The stewardess said, would you like me to take him out and put him in the new carrier? And it's like, if you can do it, go ahead. The cat was dead to the world. He did not move. She picked him up and slid him into the other carrier. They were calling my flight. I walked to the next gate, went in. It was a stuffed plane. I stuck him under that seat. I don't think he moved from the time she put him in that crate until I dropped him off at my in-laws' house and said, Theodore's is yours now. And everything worked perfectly. It was just the way it was planned. At least that's what I told my son. And that's my story about taking a cat across country.
One brave man, one brave man. That's all I can say. You deserve a medal just for that. Thank you so much. Whew. Well, now let's look at my magic list and see why there's Portia Scholler Jackson. She's our next storyteller. Portia, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
All right. Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to everyone. I would like to tell you the story of a day and some months in the life of quarantine Portia. Well, it has been, one would say, rock and rolling, up and down. First off, let's understand. Nourishment, teaching, and learning, well, those things I love to do. But I like to learn things by choice. But this quarantine time we've been in, I done had to learn some things I didn't want to learn, like this technology stuff. You know, paper and pen doesn't bother me, but Google docking, web, Xing, zooming, YouTubing, zip scanning, Schoology, Jupiter, all these sites have driven me bananas. But this is all because I'm just trying to survive and live. Yes, I'll survive COVID, but surviving quarantine is a different beast. I didn't want to learn how to merge and share screens. I don't understand why I have to go in another room because I'm freezing and it's grumbling and then all of a sudden it dies and then you got to revive it. This whole thing about technology that I had to learn has driven me crazy. This is the life of quarantine Portia. Let's talk about the kids at home, e-learning. You got to e-learn right there with them. I don't understand half the new stuff they do in the book. You want me to try to help them do it on the screen? Whether or not it was the desktop, the laptop, the iPad, the Kindle, I'm telling you, it's all driving me crazy. I barely mastered my brother typewriter. And I don't know tell you how long ago that was, but the life of quarantine Porsche has had some ups and downs. My whole timing, my clock is off. I'm not talking about my midlife crisis clock, or I'm not talking about my biological clock. I'm talking about, I don't know when it's time to get up or when it's time to get down. If it's time to go down, I'm up. If it's time to be up, I'm down. I can't figure it out. Time is relevant. It's like worse than being retired. But let's talk about what you draw yourself to. If you're not on a screen, then you're in the TV. Some folks call it the idiot box, you know. But let me tell you, from 11 to 7, we all into CNN. And what do? They come up with this other thing where you can watch it all, MSNBC, Fox, and everybody on some kind of mixed screen. And then you got to figure out how to work your remote to figure out where to make it so you can hear what that box is saying. I don't know how to shadow or make my Netflix go from my phone to the TV. And what is Hulu? Hulu, hello, I don't know. But I'm telling you, all of this is what I'm going through in my pandemic. Quarantine Porsche's having a way. Now let's talk about, you got to be the school lunch. So I'm fixing lunch for them. Then you got to have dinner. Then you got to feed them for breakfast. And then Facebook. Have you talked to you about Facebook and Instagram? These are some other things that are burdening me during this quarantine. I don't want a TikTok, but I watch. I don't want an Instagram. I don't want no parts of all of that stuff. I barely want to FaceTime live for church, but at least I got to get my religion on. Who knew you could do all of this? But let me tell you, one of these things I can say is quarantine Porsche's doing her best. One of these things that you understand that on Facebook, everybody is sharing recipes. Don't send me a recipe. Can you see? I'm more voluptuous than I started before quarantine. All these pots, the pot roast in the crock pot, the air fryer. I want fried chicken. Give me some grease in the deep fryer. All of this stuff during quarantine is driving me nuts. Now, let me explain. I'm a happily married woman. And yes, we've done therapy and done some seminars and some Zoom classes and some support groups. You got all this time, you might as well use it, learn and be wise. But then after we have worked on the happiness of the romance of the marriage and strengthening our family, I want y'all to know I go to bed with other men. Yes, ma'am. Don't be upset. First, I start off getting the news of the world from my Lester hosts. And then I dive into Jimmy Kimmel. And then I end up with Jimmy Fallon. I have my evening cocktail with Steve Colbert, whiskey rye or a good bourbon. And then every Friday night, I have me some edibles from California with Bill Maher. Now, I will tell you, I became a cougar because way late into the night, I take on Trevor Noah. And when I feel like dancing, if I'm not listening to jazz on Facebook Live or YouTube, then I have been doing The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. It's about 7 different episodes. But nevertheless, when I feel like being with family, I turn to the Disney Channel and we do concerts and sing-alongs. And then I retire and I realize what an experience I've had as quarantined Portia. I know you wish you could go to bed with them fellas like me.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to tell your husband about them other men. Thank you so much, Portia. That was hilarious. Listen, Julie Lawani is next. Julie, are you ready? I've seen you. You
I
look
saw
so
you.
gorgeous. How you
That's
doing?
kind. That's very kind of you to say. You look very good too, my friend. She said I look like a terrorist when she walked into the room. I should tell you, as a stockbroker, I'm used to all kinds, but I knew that this couple was going to be an unusual appointment because he walked in for his review with nothing but a Bible. He sat down and the first thing he asked me was, "Do you know Osama bin Laden?" I said, "No. And I'm also not a terrorist. I'm happy to look at your portfolio if you want, or you can find another financial advisor." She said, "Will you read the Bible with me?" I said, "No." I got up and I said, "I think you need to find another financial advisor." As I was trying to escort them out of the conference room, she lunged at me and proceeded to spit on my face and on my neck with I guess her spittle dribbling down on my blouse. And then she said with great rage, "Why don't you just go back to where you belong?" I remember telling my assistant to get them out of the office as quickly as possible as I went to the bathroom. I cried for a few minutes and then splashed some cold water because my makeup was all smeared. I looked in the mirror and I didn't recognize myself. I saw an Indian woman, brown hair, brown eyes, brown skin. She was me, but I didn't know her. Later that night, I went to bed thinking I'm just going to forget this because truthfully, this isn't the first time I've been fired by a client for the color of my skin. I got over it before, I would get over it again. However, the following morning, the shame, it lingered and it grew into bitterness as the weeks pressed on because every time I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize my reflection. And so the way I dealt with it was to withdraw. And I didn't answer any of the calls or texts from my friends or family for months. And then one day, one of my friends decided to visit me in my office, my beautiful, kind, white friend. She burst into my office and she said, "What the hell, Julie?" And I said, "I do not want to talk to you right now." And she said, "At least have the courage to tell me why you're not answering my calls." And I said, "Courage." And I could feel my temperature rising. And she yelled back, "Yeah, courage." And I said, "What would you know about courage?" I said, "You have enjoyed the privilege of being a white woman your whole life. You have been told that your feelings, thoughts, and body matter. You have the privilege of treating racism like it's some kind of academic problem. In fact, your entitlement runs so deep that you will assume that you are owed an explanation for why I don't want to speak to you. Who are you to tell me to do anything? Get out. Get out of my office and get out of my life." And as you're walking out the door, I want you to remember that the courage that you think you have is not anywhere close to the strength and determination of every woman of color that she has to come to the day with every single time. But I want you to remember that the difference between you and the rest of us is that we don't expect anyone to notice. All the color drained from my friend's face. I collapsed to the floor and I started crying. She ran to me, she put her hand on mine, tears streaming down her cheeks, and she said, "I'm sorry." If you could imagine a giant glass just shattering in hundreds of shards, that's what her words were to me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt less alone. My friend met my visceral hate and anger with kindness. She stood with me as I indicted not just her and her family, but her history for why I abandoned my identity. And she did it because she knows how devastating racism truly is. That night was the first night in months that when I looked in the mirror, I actually recognized my face. I think the greatest prejudice I have ever felt was the voice in my head who tells me that I'm not good enough as I am, that I need to bleach my skin or somehow be less Indian. My friend did not give me my identity. Nobody can do that. What she did was give me space to figure out how to reclaim it. The first step back to myself was anger. Anger at the devastation of racism, anger at the world and the lies that it perpetrates, but most of all, anger at myself for believing those lies for decades. I believe each of us have a choice. We can either see prejudice as we live our lives and walk around it, or when we see it, we can choose to fight it. I chose to fight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. That was wonderful, wonderful. You know, spit is a problem I have. I have a problem with spit. And you are a strong woman. When you let somebody spit on you, you don't beat them to a pulp. But that's just my social commentary, because I'm not as good a woman as you are, Julie, okay? But saying that, we've got another teller in the wings. At least I can say the wings, because I can't see nobody but 8 people on my screen. I don't know why. Is it because of my iPad or what? But we'll figure it out next time. Because Holly Robeson is our next teller. Holly, are you there?
That I am, yes.
Yeah.
Good evening. All right. A few weeks ago, there I was laying flat in the dental hygienist chair. And it was at that moment that I remembered a lesson that I had learned in a very similar chair many years before. My very first job as a teenager was in Dr. Getz' dental office in Farmington, New Mexico. I pretty much considered myself the luckiest girl to get to walk through the back door. I'd open the door and be bombarded by the unearthly smells of sterilization and fluoride, and make my way to the desk cubby behind the front desk, where Pam and Brenda sat greeting patients with their smiling faces and chatting with them. My first job of the day was to make reminder appointment calls. That's like dinosaurs walking on the earth today, an actual real live person calling you to remind you. I talk to a lot of answering machines. Hello, this is Holly from Dr. Getz' office. I'm calling to remind you about your appointment tomorrow, Wednesday the 4th at 3 o'clock. We look forward to seeing you. After I finished that job, then I got to juggle a huge stack of patient files and file them away into the floor-to-ceiling filing shelves with their color-coded alphabetization. And then I had got to pull the files for the next few days. Easy, tedious work. All the while, the background noise was music playing like you'd hear in offices today, only I guess now that music would be called oldies. But the most prominent sound in the dental office was that of Robin, our dental hygienist. As I worked, I could hear Robin laughing and asking questions and responding to questions. One day I asked Pam, I said, Pam, is Robin cleaning her best friend's teeth? She always sounds like she's cleaning her best friend's teeth. And Pam just looked at me and said, oh, you know Robin. Everyone's her best friend. I think that's a superpower. Making everyone feel like your best friend. It does have its drawbacks, though. Many afternoons, I would hear Pam say to Brenda, look at the time, she's behind schedule again. It's your turn to go tell her to stop the chit chat and get to work. One day, Brenda stuck her head around the filing cabinet and smiled at me and said, Holly, I checked. You're about due for a cleaning. I've got a spot here in Robin's schedule that I haven't been able to fill. You're gonna fill it. She's gonna clean your teeth today, and I won't even make you check out or clock out. Getting paid to have your teeth cleaned? It's a pretty cool deal for a teenager. So when Robin's patient left, Brenda caught her attention and said, Robin, right here's your next patient. You're gonna clean Holly's teeth. And I looked at Robin's face. Her eyes lit up and she looked at me and said, Holly, come on back. I'm so excited. So I followed Robin back. It was my turn to get to feel like her best friend. While she was leaning me back, I told her about the latest role I was rehearsing in my current play. And then while she was working on my teeth, she told me about her favorite play that she'd ever seen. And my toes would fidget, but I loved feeling like Robin's best friend. Now, that experience with Robin didn't inspire me to want to be a dental hygienist. I have no desire to do anything with anyone else's body parts. You can ask my children. But what that experience did inspire me was a desire to make other people feel the way Robin made people feel. So I've striven to make everybody else feel like a best friend.
That's a wonderful goal. Keep that up. You know, I need to remind you that our next session is going to be on February 16th. And it's going to be at Centerpoint Brewery. I'm sure if you'll notice our emails, you'll see that broadcast. But I want to remind you, I have this phone, you know, that's run out of storage, and I can't move my email up and down. But I want to thank the people, our sponsors again, Storytelling Arts and Freetown Village, are partners in sponsoring this. And if you don't have anything to do with your phone, which I'm assuming is not working as poorly as mine, you might want to text a donation, which will be split between Storytelling Arts and Freetown Village. And that number is, if I can see it, I will read it. You know, all I want for Christmas is a new cell phone. But you want to text it to SAI, and that's at 4421. And you want to put SAI in the text, and the donations will be split between Storytelling Arts of Indiana and Freetown Village. Well, now, Holly, thank you for that story. But we got Wendy Breedhole coming up next. Breadhole. Did I do that right? I'm
It
not
is.
sure I know Wendy.
It's Breadhold. Thank you. We've met
Hey.
once before.
Yes. Hi, Wendy. I
Hi.
see your face now.
Good. Okay. The first time I feel a man's gaze on me, I'm about 12 years old. I'm walking along the Mayfair Air Force Base officers' pool wearing a one-piece bathing suit with a pink and gray chevron pattern on it. A man, definitely a man, not a boy, and definitely an officer in the US Air Force like my father, looks my body up and down approvingly and smiles at me. And despite my youth and the fact that no man has ever looked at me like that before, I know immediately what that look is and what it means. My whole young life, everything I've seen in TV and movies and magazines and advertisements, and don't get me started on Barbie, we don't have the time, has prepared me for this ultimate realization of my purpose as a girl becoming a woman in this culture, the approval that I feel in that man's gaze. And as a result, I tentatively, nervously, heartbreakingly, I feel proud. And as I swim and move around the pool, I experience a new form of self-consciousness in my body, a self-objectification that has become all too familiar. I'm at the pool that day with my mom and my 4-year-old brother who's learning how to swim. And I'm a confident swimmer, so I don't think twice about allowing him to jump into the pool and swim to me in the diving pool, which is about 12 feet deep. And I probably want to show off how grown up I am because the man is within sight. So my brother jumps out of my mom's arms and makes his way over to me. But when he gets to me, he starts to panic and he's flailing and he's grabbing at me and he's pushing me underwater. And I'm trying to stay above water and keep him up too, but I can't, and I keep going under. And our mom is only a few feet away, but for some reason, she thinks that we're joking around or something, and she's laughing. And that just adds to the horror that I'm drowning and my mother is laughing. And luckily, the lifeguard recognizes what's going on, and she dives in and she gets us to the side, and I climb out and I'm sobbing and I'm gasping, and I catch the eye of the man. And in my memory, he looks at me in disgust and leaves. I have been revealed not as a woman, not as an object of desire, but as the child that I am, and I'm humiliated. And I kept that memory to myself as a story of my own deep shame, my shame. It took me decades to realize that I was 12, not much older than my own daughter is now. And of course, that man knew I was a child the minute he saw me. But in a culture that's warped my mind and convinced me somehow that my worth is defined by his approval, it didn't allow me to see that I had no reason to feel ashamed. And while I can't protect my daughter from the fact that this culture will conspire in 1,000 new and powerful ways to make her feel like she has to doubt herself, I'm doing my damnedest to ensure that she knows her worth. And while I teach her to understand what I know to be true, maybe I'll begin to believe it too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you, thank you. I have one final teller for tonight, and her name is Kelly Foster. So Kelly, come on down.
Thank you. 3 months ago, as I sat in COVID isolation in the forgotten formal living room of my home, memories of the convalescent stories of my childhood began to take shape. When I was a little girl, bedtimes were for Dad. My younger sister and I shared a set of bunk beds the man crafted from his own hands, and each night he would usher us into our room and tuck us in with his famous woo-shaw. Woo-shaw isn't a technical term per se, it's just a private onomatopoeia for the action of our father, gathering the blanket in his large hands, lifting it up in one big motion, letting a pocket of air form beneath it, and then letting it slowly fall as he intoned woo-shaw, the blanket settling on our small wriggling bodies. They were so fuzzy and warm, the edges made of soft rayon, the silkies we called them, self-soothing, smooth, and wonderful. My sister and I would talk under cover of darkness, sometimes breaking into fits of giggles, then Dad's heavy footfalls coming toward our door, our heads disappearing underneath into the dark, warm haven, light suddenly filling the room, admonishments given in that stern fatherly voice. When I got sick as a child, I would be sent to bed to let the amoxicillin work its magic. I always hoped for a visit from Dad and maybe some of his stories. He would come in from his shop and sit down beside me, the smell of cedar and turpentine imbued in his clothes, and ask me which story I wanted tonight. The answer was always the same, a pizza shop story. One of my father's first jobs was at a pizza shop when he was 17. Among my favorites was the story of the night a man came in and asked for a pizza topped with the hottest peppers they had. The man asked for a sample, and my dad tentatively handed him a jar of pickled habaneros. The man took the jar, unscrewed the lid, let it clang to the countertop, plucked a pepper from the juice and popped it in its mouth. "Ah, that ain't no hot pepper," the man proclaimed, before picking up the jar and draining its contents, juice and all, down the hatch. Dad would chuckle then, remembering the boldness of this peculiar stranger who happened into his shop, and I grinned from ear to ear, feverish but growing tired, yearning to hear the rest. Dad goes on. "One time, I delivered a pizza to the Central State Hospital, and there was a man standing there who looked just like that tall Indian from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He even had a mop in his hand. He saw me coming, and his eyes went all wide, and he shouted, 'Pizza!' before running off. They just let me walk on in there." There's a hint of nostalgia to the old man's voice then, a yearning for the kind of carefree pre-9/11 freedom to simply walk into a locked psych ward, pizza box in hand. Another of his favorites, he tells with glee, is when his friend forgot the pizzas on the top of the car, and when he turned the corner, they flew into the ditch. He just went and picked them up and put them back in the box and kept on going. We both laugh, picturing the ejected pizza being held aloft, inspected in the dim yellow light of the street lamp, and hastily placed back in the box. 25 years later, in the pitch dark middle of the night, shivering violently, waiting for my fever to break, and hoping this virus would spare my lungs, I heard echoes of Dad's voice. Could almost smell the wood shavings on his shirt. Remembered the little girl who needed the comfort of Dad's stories. Knowing that little girl lived on in the quiet, fevered dread of this night. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been a wonderful year of stories. Outside of the COVID, let's don't talk about that. That could be a category for one of our topics next year, this year. COVID tales. Sort of like quarantine Porsche, you know what I'm saying? At any rate, I'd like to thank everyone for being a part of our stories tonight. I really want to thank our volunteers because we have Michelle Goodrich and Alice Mattingly and Tom Corbett. I'm not quite sure what they're doing behind the scenes. I got an idea, but we don't want to tell you exactly because we don't want you to throw nothing at them. Well, you can't this way. But at any rate, thank you so much for all your help. Let me repeat. Our next slam is at Center Point Brewery, 1125 East Brookside Avenue on February 16th. And the theme is encounters. If you live in Central Indiana, if you're visiting even, come on down. Bring some of your friends. And I remembered I offered a beer if you came, okay? Now, I also want to remind you that if you text 44321, I left the 3 out, to Storytelling Arts of Indiana, that's SAI, the donation you make will be equally divided between Storytelling Arts of Indiana and Freetown Village. We'd like to thank our media partner, sponsor again, WFYI, as well as Getzer Investors. My phone is frozen and I'm trying to remember this from my COVID brain. At any rate, you did a wonderful job tonight. I enjoyed all of these stories and I had a big belly laugh on top of all of that, in the middle of one of the stories, I started choking. I started crying and I had to grab my glass of water. But I want to thank each and every one of our tellers tonight for the stories that you shared. Oh, I forget I have this little chat button here that I have to look at. I don't know. Wendy, where are you? Where are you?
I'm
Wendy?
here. Here I am.
Are you in Indiana? Where are you?
I am. I'm in Evansville.
Okay. And Holly, where are you? Are you in Indiana too?
I am far, far away in Oregon.
Okay, I thought so. I was trying to remember the people I thought were away. I know Beverly Williams, Stuart Williams is in Chicago. Any other people are long, far away?
I'm from
Jill, where are
Arizona.
you?
I'm in Arizona.
All right.
Beautiful, sunny, perfect weather, Arizona.
Well, we can brag. It was 42 degrees here yesterday. You know, I don't know what it is now.
I'm from Charlotte,
Uh-huh.
via Chicago and New Mexico and Rhode Island.
Okay. But are you there today?
I'm in Charlotte today.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, is it snow there?
Charlottesville, I'm sorry.
Okay. Is there snow there?
Yes.
Well, see, all my friends, north and south, they got snow. I want to know how to act. Yeah, I want to know how to act when we finally get snow. But I'm thankful and grateful for whatever we have today that I can live to see what it is. Okay. We have a tie. Woo-woo. I know you thought, well, we're going to be first, second, and third, but no, that's the regular season. This season, we had a $200 prize. But since we have a tie, just like the Powerball jackpot, you got to share. And drum roll, please. Da-da-da-da-da. Our tie is between Beverly Williams and Julie Lawani. Good job. Woohoo. Tom says, thanks for joining us from afar. I enjoyed the stories. I hope to see many of you on the 16th. I tell people, ask me what New Year's resolution I have. My resolution is to live until 2023. That's all. That's the best I can do right now. You were wonderful. You were great. You were fantastic. But right now, I'm going to finish watching The Price is Right. Anything else I need to add, Ellen? I think she left me already. No, she didn't. She's in charge of this room. Happy New Year, and it was good seeing everybody. And Noel, is that cat still alive? Yes?
Yes, that cat is still alive.
Okay.
And he still won't let me pet him.
All right. Good job. Well, I just like to say to everybody, and thanks for showing up and showing out. See you later. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Beverly. Bye.